Good morning or afternoon, everyone. Good evening, wherever you're joining us from all over the world. We're so happy you're here. I'm Karen Guggenheim, founder of WOHASU, co-founder of World Happiness Summit. And we are so grateful that you're taking the time out today to join us from all over the world. We see in the chat every place you're joining to celebrate happiness. As we know, Saturday is the International Day of Happiness. And we wanted to take this opportunity to mark the importance of happiness and well-being in our lives, whether you are a member of the WOHASU community or HSA or the University of Miami or Kripalu, Maria's community, whoever and wherever you're coming from, or if you're new to the science of happiness and are just exploring what we're talking about, we welcome you because we believe that it's so important to mark this special day and this science that we are so involved with, and that we see the importance, particularly now in this very trying time that we have lived. Let me just start off saying that, as all of you know, the World Happiness Summit had to be canceled again because of the situations with COVID. So we wanted to bring a little bit of the spirit of the summit here. These amazing experts, Tal Ben Shahar, Maria Sirad, Isaac Priletensky, have been members of the WOHASU community, advocates of what we're doing with community building, teaching, learning, the practical science, the practical aspects of the science of happiness, and bringing it to a global community. And like the UN Secretary said so many years ago, happiness is very serious business. So we're so happy you're here today. Let me share with you what we envision. We envision a really what we said, a fireside dialogue. So fireside chat dialogue, a dynamic dialogue. So please post your questions. We want to answer them. We're going to have conversations back and forth. We want to talk about the latest research, what we've seen that is happening in the world. And I'd like to start with Tal Ben Shahar, one of the leading happiness experts in the world, an amazing person, just as all of the panelists here today. What I love is that these people are incredible, wise experts, but really as people, they're so authentic and so generous and so kind with their time, their energy, just so mission driven. And it's my absolute pleasure to be able to bring you these eminence in not only in happiness and well-being and matter and resilience, but really in the next level of human thinking and development. So Tal, can you tell us a little bit about what is happiness? What do we mean by happiness, and why does it matter during challenging times? We hear across the world that, are you going to talk about, why are you talking about happiness? We have bigger problems. What do you see? What's going on?
Thank you, Karen. First of all, thank you for putting this together. It's so important now, probably more than ever. So thank you to WOHASU, and it's great to be here with dear friends, with you, Isaac and Maria. A friend of mine recently said to me, Tal, shouldn't we quarantine the science of happiness, at least for a while? And my answer to that was no, I don't think so. I think now is the time, if there was a time, to bring it out. Why is that? Because, when we talk about happiness, we're not just talking about, fun or pleasurable emotions. Yes, surely that is part of happiness, but it's only a part of happiness. When we talk about happiness, we're also talking about a sense of meaning and purpose, of being present. We're talking about physical well-being. We're talking about learning and curiosity. We're talking, of course, about relationships, and we're talking about emotions. And even when we talk about emotions, we're not just talking about joy and fun and love and satisfaction. We're also talking about learning to better deal with painful emotions. Right now, anxiety levels are, as far as we know, at an all-time high. Depression levels are extremely high and continuing to rise. So what is the relevance of the science of happiness? What really helped me answer this question was a term that was coined by Nassim Taleb. Nassim Taleb is a professor at New York University, and he talks about anti-fragility. Specifically, anti-fragility, the opposite of fragility, is about taking resilience to the next level. So, we talk about resilience, and resilience is about returning to its original form. You put pressure on a system, it goes back to its original form if it's resilient. When we talk about resilience in the original sense, that is, it's actually a term taken from engineering. We talk about resilience, you drop a ball, it bounces back up to where it was before. It recovers. Anti-fragility takes it a step further, and the ball doesn't just bounce back up, it bounces back higher. The system doesn't just go back to where it was before, it goes to a place where it's bigger, better, healthier. And the science of happiness can help us become more anti-fragile. You see, we have anti-fragile systems all around us. We have it in our bodies. You go to the gym, you lift weights, you're putting stress on your muscles. It's an anti-fragile system. It grows stronger as a result of this stress. We have it not just physiologically, we have it psychologically. The term post-traumatic growth, PTG, not as common, not as well understood as PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, but no less important. What are the conditions that we can put in place to increase the likelihood that we are resilient, that we are anti-fragile, that we do experience post-traumatic growth? What are these conditions? And this is the question that the science of happiness asks today. And hopefully we'll get some of these answers in the next 90 minutes or so.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Tal. And this ties in directly with my thoughts and questions to you, Maria. Maria is one of the foremost resilient experts. And again, what is really amazing about Maria is just the knowledge, the wisdom, the kindness, the space that she holds for people who are experiencing challenges. And Maria, listening to you is almost like providing a pomade or a cream in soothing these difficult situations. And I love the way that you are able to frame and help us guide, because life happens, right? It just happened that in 2020, it happened to all of us. And so I'd love your perspective on what exactly is resilience, because we hear it all the time. We hear it at the workplace, at schools. We need to elevate resilience. What is resilience? And how can we work on this, particularly when we're feeling so anxious or so afraid? How do we make that first step? Because really what we're here about is how to learn a practical way. What is the process of happiness? What is the process of well-being?
Thank you, Karen. Hello, dear friends in the world, and to Isaac and Tal, such a privilege to be with you. So I want to take this notion of anti-fragility that Tal so beautifully articulated for us and take us into the next phase, which is the return to normal phase that we are heading toward. One of the definitions, ancient Latin definitions of resilience, had to do with jumping and leaping, and it really aligns beautifully with Tal's understanding of resilience. It is about the capacity to adapt to stress, trauma, and loss. It's also about growth through adversity. It's sort of taking ourselves to that next level. And in this return to normal phase that we've entered, we're going to have conflicting emotions and uncertainty about safety, a lack of control about certain things like timelines for vaccinations. And also with all of that is this undertone of worry about, is this going to stick? Like, if I get vaccinated and I get to return to the office, does that stick, or am I going to be sent back home again in October? So all of that is the territory that we're heading into now. And in terms of your one practical piece of guidance, I'm actually going to refer back to Tal's work that I learned from him more than 10 years ago, which has to do with living into the genius of the and. Really freeing ourselves from rigid black and white thinking or black and white either or behaving. And so, for example, what we know about the most resilient of us is that we recognize the fractures in the world, for example, and we still focus on the beneficial. So we might recognize the incredible violence and injustices around race and identity around the world, and recognize at the same time that conversations are being held at levels that have never been held before in organizations, systems, communities, and in individual homes to a much greater extent. We can respect, we have to respect the difficult emotions that we're experiencing. I lose sleep over the fact that I've got 3 young adults in the college, high school age who have their own definitions about safe behavior when they're away at school. And I can remember my strengths. I can remember that I'm the kind of mom who is super clear and communicative about what I think best practices look like and feel like. I can leverage my capacity to communicate, right? And we can acknowledge, our personal stressors, our griefs, our losses. There was a beautiful article just recently in the New York Times about all the small losses we've experienced, and of course our larger losses, and also celebrate the gains and the progress. As we live into the this beautiful what starts to happen is a grounded sense of optimism, an increasing sense of inner control, even when things still outside our domain are not under our control, and the capacity to create next better moments, which create next better days. Ultimately, I think the longing we all have, Karen, whether spoken or unspoken, is that this is a terrible year. This was an horrific year. We do not want anyone to experience this again. And yet, I do believe there is a longing that at the end, we know this to have been a year worth having lived. And by integrating these practices of mattering, of happiness and resilience, we give ourselves a chance to be able to look back 4 or 5 years from now and say, that was horrible. And in some ways, this was a year worth living.
Wow, that's so beautiful, Maria. Thank you for framing that. That was amazing. The end does resonate so much because you also talk about the pond and the swamp. So we have to make sure that we look at both, right? Because I really, investing in happiness, investing in well-being, and looking at that and having a whole picture that is reality. Another of the WOHASU speakers, Fred Luskin, he says, you can be better, you can be worse, but you're okay. And so we have to kind of keep that in mind. With that said, one of the most impactful things for me has been learning from Dr. Isaac Pilitensky, who's a former dean of the School of Education and Human Development at the UM and vice provost of institutional culture. He's been with us since the beginning, and Isaac's work is just amazing to me on mattering and the importance. It was a groundbreaking thought for me, the knowledge of the value of feeling valued and adding value to relationships, to workplaces. And this year in the United States, we've also have challenges this past year on fairness and on and mattering has been a big component and impact of well-being. So Isaac, can you share with us, what do we mean by fairness? It's a broad concept. What do we mean fairness in the workplace, in education, in our communities, and how can we elevate that, and how does that interplay with well-being?
Thank you, Karen. It's really great to be with all of you today, to see my friends on the screen and many others through the chat. Well, it turns out that fairness has a big impact on mattering, and mattering has a big impact on wellness. So these 3 concepts are really interconnected. And fairness really comes in 2 types. It's about the basic outcomes that we need in life. I need access to love, food, shelter. So we say in a fair society, people have access to these basic resources. We call this distributive justice. But there is a second kind, which is really important as well, and we call it procedural fairness, which is about having voice and choice, participating in decisions affecting our lives. So there are other kinds, but for now, let's just focus on these two, right? Outcomes and processes. I want to be able to participate in processes affecting my life. I want to have control over what happens in my family, at home, at work. And our studies demonstrate that the more fairness you experience, the more you are treated with respect and dignity in your family, in relationships, organizations at work, and in the community, the more fairness, the more you feel like you matter, because you feel valued. When you're treated with respect, you feel valued. That's a big part of mattering. And also, you feel you have an opportunity to add value, to make a contribution. Fairness is about making sure all of us have an opportunity to add value, first to ourselves, but also to others in the community. So mattering depends on feeling valued and adding value by self and others. And during the pandemic, a lot of us have suffered because we haven't had as many opportunities to feel valued, to go to work or to meet with friends where there is warmth and acceptance and love shared in a physical way. So we have suffered from lack of feeling valued, appreciated, loved, and fewer opportunities to add value because we're not communing as much. I'm not spending as much time with my neighbors, friends. I don't go to civic events as much. So the question is, what can we do when the world is shrinking? And I think we have to find one square between feeling valued and adding value and self and others. This is kind of like a 2x2 little table. Mm-hmm. And we have to think, can I add value to others today? What can I do? Can I call my mom? Can I call a friend who may be lonely? Or what can I do to help myself? What can I learn today that I haven't learned before? So find the square in this 2x2 table and ask yourself, what's the minimal difference I can make today? Can I make somebody feel valued? And our studies show that the more mattering we experience, the higher the levels of well-being, interpersonal, community, occupational, physical, psychological, and economic well-being. We know there are different models of well-being. This is the one we use. It's called the I code. And our studies show the more you feel like you matter, the higher the levels of well-being in all these domains.
Wow, that's fantastic. Thank you, Isaac. Tal, this idea of what Isaac just talked about and all the elements and all the benefits to investing in well-being and becoming happier, right? To me, we've had conversations before on how it's so obvious that it's so worthwhile to invest in this. Just forget about it's the right thing to do because you feel better and relationships improve, but it's also tangible business results that are improved, and even in communities and cities and governments can be improved by decreasing mental health issues. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that whether you're in an organization, whether you're in a business or in a school, or you think about your family, happiness is a good investment. Why? Because first of all, as you point out, it's good in and of itself. It feels good to feel good. It's part of our nature to aspire to it. And if you increase levels of well-being even by a little bit, sure, your relationships improve. You actually live longer. So mind, body are connected. You become more productive, more creative, more engaged, more motivated. Now, these are the very things that are essential in today's workplace. These are the very things that are essential in today's schools. Why? Because we've become, we're living in an age of distraction, in the words of Daniel Goleman. Increase happiness, you have more engagement. So many kids are drifting today. This is the work of William Damon from Stanford. And when they find more happiness, they're more likely to connect to a sense of meaning and purpose. And then conversely, when they find a sense of meaning and purpose, they're likely to be happier. So investing in happiness means better grades, better performance at work, better relationships, better health. Every dimension you look at, there are benefits. And therefore, to me, and I think whomever looks at the data, investing in happiness is a no-brainer, especially today when so many of these variables, there's so much struggle around so many of these variables.
Great, fantastic. Thank you for pointing out all those benefits. Maria, Tal talks about these challenging times and then all the benefits on happiness, right? And investing in this, and certainly I've had the opportunity to grow from trauma, and as you've done so much of this research and have this opportunity as well, what can we, in addition to the and that you explained so eloquently, what are the other tools or benefits that can really elevate resilience, keeping in mind of what Isaac mentioned about mattering and how it's important to relationship, and following up with what Tal was mentioning, this idea of flexing the muscle, right? Is this something that's a one-off, like we've done, like I had this, or how do we put it in play daily? What are the tools that we can do daily that can flex this muscle, particularly for those of us who are not used to this kind of reframing, and even for the ones of us who are, sometimes the challenges are so great that we forget.
Karen, I wish it were a one-off thing. I wish I could just go to a happiness spa for a day, like with my mask on, and come home and that would be it. I want to talk for a minute about elevating resilience and well-being and happiness through small steps. But I do want to pause because I so dearly want everyone to be able to hear Tal. Tal, I don't know if you're hearing, your sound is really sketchy. And so I don't know if there is a way to work with that. I don't know if you're hearing that, Karen, but it's been showing up in the chat. It's very crackly. Yeah. So maybe if there's an option that you could work with. So this capacity, by the way, to name reality as it is and face reality first is crucial for well-being, right? We have none of this happiness, positivity, mattering rests on denial. It rests on first facing reality as it is. What, above and beyond the perspective of the and building in the and, we want to move toward prioritizing positivity. Prioritizing meaning, like Isaac was pointing toward, how could I add value in any one day or with any one person? Prioritizing the things that actually inspire us. I'm famous for, Googling inspirational YouTube videos to see what's out there that can elevate me and keep me energized, a sense of hopefulness. Prioritizing recovery. We know that moments of happiness, moments of mattering, not only build in the benefits that Tal spoke to, they build in respite. They build in respite from the worry and the drain. And that, having a daily experience, even if it's 10 minutes a day of respite, can often be enough to feel like, I can do this. I can do this day. And that gets us to the next day, right? So I think about things that inspire us, that up-level meaning and mattering, that build in positivity. And lastly, one category that's really important to pay attention to is what is it that actually creates that sense of inner strength, that inner strength. Watching, beautiful YouTube videos that inspire me is absolutely delicious. And I absolutely need to feel like I have that inner capacity to persevere over time. So for me, inner strength is my number one go-to move is exercise. I feel stronger. I approach the day from a stronger place. So it's that small daily steps, prioritizing positivity, meaning, strength, and inspiration is sort of the formula that seems to be working globally.
Thank you so much, Maria. I love what you're saying. There are many things that came up when you were speaking. And what I love also is that it's all science-based. Like there's biological things that are happening to your body when you go outside, when you exercise, when you put your favorite song and start dancing, right? And these are moments in a day that we can schedule. And so one of the things that I would encourage those of you out there, because we get this question asked all the time, what can I do? Well, if it's not intuitive for you or habitual yet, schedule it. Schedule 5 minutes, 5 minutes in the midday or in the evening, and move and be outside. And what I love about that is that also it takes you out of the cognitive. My God, we're in our heads so much, and particularly when we're so anxious and we're afraid and all this information. Which vaccine do I take? Do I not take the vaccine? Can I? Which mask? When is it going to end? All these different things that are going on inside of our heads. That sometimes we even have difficulty sleeping because it keeps going and the brain keeps going and going. And personally, I found that if I schedule things, and even if I schedule like anxiety time, even like, okay, at 12, I'm going to have 15 to 20 minutes where I'm going to just freak out a little bit. But then it's about kind of control. It doesn't have to be my entire day. I can look at other things and I can savor. I love the idea of savoring. You're talking about the videos. People are taking photography and taking beautiful pictures and doing that. And just to remember that there's beauty out there, because we kind of forget. And again, we're dealing with biology, so we have a brain that's looking out for the negative. But if we're purposeful about it, they're incredible results. And Isaac, when we're talking about noticing, right, that to me also ties into mattering. When you first spoke just now, you were talking about all these benefits in investing in these relationships, whether they're at home, in the workplace and such. And the research also shows that by engaging in altruistic behavior, it's kind of self-serving. So it's such a benefit and such a ripple, in the same way that negativity has a rippling effect, that if we take it to a level of like war, we can do the opposite and have a rippling effect of positivity. And again, not putting on rose-colored glasses, looking at reality, but we can also treat people with kindness, even when we're telling them things that are challenging or when we're saying no, right? How can we start creating this language of well-being and this vocabulary of well-being, and keeping in mind that doesn't mean you do whatever anybody says or accept unacceptable behavior, but we are elevating each other for a common goal of everyone in the whole system being well.
Yes, happy to address it, but I think Maria wanted to say something, so I want to give a chance to Maria. She was about to comment on something you said, so.
Okay.
You are so kind. I just wanted to give an example of, what it's like to be a real human being. When COVID-19 hit, 85% of my business disappeared because it involved global travel. I spent the next 8 months, doing everything I could to build up the scaffolding of work again, while stewarding the 5 young adults who, between me and my partner, kept coming home and wanting to be fed and so on. And I kind of burned out by the end of the year. And I took my own wisdom and the wisdom of our science to cultivate a habit of starting the day with one honest thing. Every morning I write down just one true thing. It's 2 sentences, but it's a way of honoring myself, centering myself, starting the day from a place of inner control. So Isaac, I wanted to thank you for noticing and honoring. And it's just a real life example of what it means to prioritize this small daily change.
Awesome. Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Isaac, for pointing that out. And that's very helpful. Thank you.
Yes, so I think going back to your question, Karen, about how can we provide feedback to other folks, things they may need to hear that may not always be terrifically pleasant. And I really believe it's important to be compassionate to others and ourselves at the same time, in the same measure. So when you have to say something difficult to a colleague, to a friend, to a family member, it helps me to be in a compassionate place and to think what's going on in their lives. And the world is not a very happy place often. And the question that I ask myself is, through my actions, am I going to build allies or enemies? And am I going to be building relationships that will help me make the world a better place? Or am I contributing to the toxic environment that already exists plenty? So what is my responsibility to make others feel valued? And I want to draw a distinction pertinent to your question, Karen, between what I call a me culture and a we culture. You know, a me culture is about, I have the right to feel valued and be happy. A we culture is, we all have the right and responsibility to feel valued and add value, so that we can all experience wellness and fairness. So that's for me a bit of a mantra. I want to live in a we culture, and a we culture is about all of us feeling valued and having a chance to add value. That's why I think about compassion to myself and others.
That's really powerful, and I love how you brought that back to the we, right, and the collective, because we hear around the world, you know, I think all of us, we get these questions around how do we increase well-being in cities, right, and in governments, and why aren't we getting better education of our kids, right? Like, why isn't well-being in education such an important aspect until things happen where we need to explore that, right? Why aren't we kind of using this science that we have enough evidence that we can use this as preventive medicine to alleviate problems, yes, and then to enhance the experience of the whole systems that we're talking about here. Tal, that you do a lot of work around the world and speak around the world on different topics, and I think awareness is one of the key elements of what Isaac is saying, to have this self-awareness, to then be able to understand that really self-care involves the group, whether it's, you know, your immediate community at home, in your relationship at home, in your family, or at work, or a larger part in the whole ecosystem of a larger community in a city. What have you seen in this last year as the emerging trends around, you know, self-awareness and self-care, and how is that impacting larger societies?
Yeah. So before I start, please do give me a like or a not like in terms of the sound.
It's still a little crackly.
I am crackly.
A little bit crackly.
No.
Yes.
Okay. Tell me if is this better now?
Yes.
Yes.
It is better?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So, you know, there's a lot to say about this this awareness. For example, there is research showing that just after 9/11, people's levels of awareness about their own well-being, about the well-being of others, actually became a lot higher. They became more considerate, kinder, more generous. This was specifically done in New York City. So that's a great thing. You know, they saw that, you know, obviously a tragedy that happened, but as a result of it, people cared more. This lasted for 6 months, maximum 12 months. And then New Yorkers went back to where they were before. So the first question is, even if there is more caring, higher levels of awareness, will it last? The second thing, and this has more generally to do with awareness, is the role of reminders. And I want to talk specifically about the idea of what I've come to call rhetorical choices. What are rhetorical choices? Rhetorical choices are like rhetorical question. A rhetorical question is a question that the answer is obvious to. You know, we ask a kid, you know, do you want daddy to be upset with you? You know, most kids, I think, would say, no, it's a rhetorical question. It's there for effect. Very little effect, but it's there for effect. The thing, though, is that there are also rhetorical choices. For example, if I ask you, Karen, do you want to be grateful? And do you want to appreciate the good things in your life? Or do you want to take the good things in your life for granted? Well, you would say, of course, I want to appreciate the good things. You know, anyone on this call or anywhere else in the world would say, yes, of course, we want to appreciate. And yet, most people, most of the time, fail to appreciate the good things in their lives. In other words, we have a rhetorical choice. Of course, I want to appreciate. And yet we don't choose appropriately. It's the same when it comes to care. When you ask people, do you want to care, or do you prefer caring or taking for granted and ignoring the people in your life or yourself? Yeah, of course I want to care. And yet so many of us forget to do that. Now, this situation that we're in right now is a reminder. Just as, you know, 9/11 was a reminder. The question, though, is how do we take these reminders and make them more pervasive and not contingent on tragedies, whether it's 9/11 or what the world is going through right now? In other words, how do we make it part and parcel of our normal, whatever that means, or our normal lives? In other words, raise awareness about the importance of caring, about the importance of fairness, about the importance of kindness and generosity. Introduce reminders throughout our lives. Now, religions are pretty good at doing that. They constantly remind us of the kind of person that they believe we ought to become. We need to do it also outside of religion in our civil society.
I love what you said, Tal, because, you know, through WOHASU, this is exactly what we want to provide, is the framework that all of you are talking about, the different well-being models and such, that during a time where maybe we are experiencing people who are involved less in religion and the rituals and such, and there was such a sense of community through religious activity, right? But the world has moved a bit away from that, certainly in the Western world, in the US and such, to redefine spirituality in a different way. But through the science of well-being, it's amazing how, you know, there's so many of the principles that and virtues that provide support, like kindness, like forgiveness, altruism, caring, self-awareness that involves others. And I just think that it's so exciting to, one, be familiar with this information that is science-based, so we have that backing, that it feels good, because my goodness, when we talk about this and we're energized, and what I always find so is so impactful is when people say, well, if we're going to be worried, if we're going to be really investing in our kids being happy or our employees being happy, they're just going to be lazy. And I don't know about you all here on this call, but when you're happy, my God, you have so much energy. And the last thing you want to do is just stay in bed. You want to be productive. You want to be creative. You want to call, you want to act, and you want to, you know, largely to do things that involve the benefits to yourself and to others. So this is a way that we can collectively, all of us here, and become ripples to say, we have a framework now. We have a framework that we can follow, and we can elevate our personal well-being, our family, our communities. And it has to be through practice and awareness, right? And so piggybacking on that, and Maria, we have a question from the group here. and it's other centric. How do we help others? So we've talked about things that we can do for ourselves, but how do we help others who perhaps are really struggling? We have a friend, a family member who is really struggling during this time, and perhaps they're not having this awareness. How do we help them bring them into this reframing, into these tools that we're talking about now?
So I think it really begins with this balance that Isaac pointed to of honoring and mattering to ourselves, as well as honoring and mattering others. So holding a balance, filling the well first, or filling the well continuously enough that we have something to give and attend. Because those of us with loved ones who are struggling know that these struggles of anxiety, depression, helplessness don't immediately disappear. And this overarching frame of helping them move to better cognitions that lead to better self-care and little slightly increases in optimism and hope, that building it in the and is so important. And one of the great mantras, and I'd love Tal to speak to this for the moment, that is very helpful, or one of the great positions that is very helpful with a loved one, is to first grant them permission to be human. This is Tal's phrase, which is why I'd like him to speak to it. First, grant them permission to feel what they feel, think what they think, and experience life as they experience it. Tal, could you unpack that a little bit for everyone?
Sure. So the idea of the permission to be human is about accepting, embracing any and all emotions. We find that when we reject an emotion, it intensifies, it grows stronger. The Buddhists talk about it today. We have a lot of research to show it, that there are essentially two levels of suffering. The first level of suffering is natural. It's inevitable. It comes as a result of loss or disappointment or frustration. We all go through it, probably including the Dalai Lama. So that's the first level of suffering. The second level of suffering comes when we reject the first one. When I say to myself something like, well, Tal, you shouldn't be anxious now. You know the signs of happiness. You should find a way of not being anxious. What immediately happens then is that my anxiety grows, because I haven't given myself the permission to be human. When I say to myself, I shouldn't experience envy or sadness for whatever reason, immediately I feel more envious, and sadness increases. It's paradoxically when we give ourselves the permission to be human, the permission to experience any and all human emotions, that's when they do not overstay their welcome. That is when they subside. And here, and Maria, you always give examples from poetry. So I'll use one of the poems that you taught me, by Rumi, The Guest House, where he talks about inviting in any and all of our emotions as welcomed guests, as visitors from the beyond. And it's when we embrace and bring them in as guests, that's when they do not overstay their welcome. That is when they come in and they leave just as they came, opening us up to more pleasurable emotions.
I love that, Tal. And just as an additional step, because some of us are in relationship with loved ones who are struggling not just with short-term bouts, but a kind of, regular or chronic experience of depression and anxiety and so on, is one of the great inquiries that's available to us through appreciative inquiry is to help reflect with them, when you've had anxiety in the past or when you've had depression in the past and you have found your way through healthfully, what helped, what worked? We want to interview for success, because, to quote David Cooperrider, success is not accidental. When we have had moments of growth or learning or high point moments, certain factors were at play. And when we can remind a loved one that you've had anxiety or depression or the feeling of helplessness in the past and you made it through, what sustained you, that, with that beautiful compassion of permission to be human, does both. It holds us in the reality of our feelings, our experiences, and reminds us of our capacity. So that, Tina, thank you for your question. I'm sure it's a question resonant with many in the cohort today.
Thank you so much, Maria. Isaac, several of the people, and even Maria was talking about she's got kids in high school and college. And as an educator, what are, I mean, my goodness, our youth has really been impacted by this. It's interesting because thank God, largely they're not affected physically by this pandemic, but so many of their rituals, we talked about rituals and the importance of that, right? And of socialization, they have really been impacted by this. What do you see in the universities? What do you see as far as the culture, and how can we foster this culture and support them to build up these rituals and their well-being?
I think lives for students and teachers have been incredibly disrupted for a minority of students, not teachers. It's fine to study from home, but that's really a minority. You know, most students want to be with their friends. They want to stick to their routine. And I think to the extent that Zoom is what's available, we have to make sure that we use this medium to replace whatever we can do that we cannot do physically. So for example, in my classes, and this is a doctoral seminar, we start with a self-care activity. We devote the first 15 minutes of a doctoral seminar to check in with one another, and each one of us, professor and students alike, each class we take turns preparing a self-care activity, which is about centering us and about checking in with our emotions and giving us permission to experience all kinds of emotions. And I think underneath what Tal was saying, I believe, is this tremendous need to feel like I'm not crazy, that I am just human like you, and I don't have to feel shame or guilt or weak or exposed or vulnerable just because I'm having these emotions. And there is a lot of peer support literature supporting the benefits of being with a friend and just giving your friend permission to be human. And maybe you can share that you have those moments too, because then it's normalizing for others and it doesn't make the person feeling anxious or depressed. I'm the only one feeling this way, right? That's the biggest lie. We are all having these difficult moments. And I think, as both Tal and Maria said, we have to give our students space to experience what they are experiencing, to honor these emotions, but at the same time, to build new routines. Because what we know is that lack of routine is not the answer to not going to school, right? And feeling we have to have control, even in a small way. So I talk about the minimally noticeable difference, right? Some people are afraid to start something new, like exercising or studying the violin or playing chess or whatever. People are afraid. And what I say is just do 3 minutes a day. Do you see a minimal difference? That's good. Don't do more than 3 minutes. And tomorrow maybe you can do 4 minutes. Because self-efficacy is a great gift we can give to our students and to one another, right? And self-efficacy is about achieving something really, really small that hopefully can grow into other domains of life.
That's really wonderful, Isaac. I love that. I love lowering the bar, right? Almost like, you don't notice that you're jumping over a bar, you're just walking over it, and you have kind of this success and this jolt that does occur because of the reframing and the normalizing, right? What you're talking about also ties into hope, right? That we're all in it together. And Tal mentioned Buddhism, everything ends. Good things end, bad things end, but the nature of life is that it's always changing, growing, and ending all the time, right? And so I think that we can also look at this this experience in a collective way and can unite us, right? In this global trauma, that now we have an opportunity to create something different and to show up a different way. And I'm thinking, I'm questioning, were these practices being done before the pandemic, like what you were just describing now with the classrooms, that this self-awareness, is that something that was happening before, or is that something new because of COVID?
Some people selectively did them before. I started before, but there is a lot more of that going on right now. And I think it's wise, and it's an opportunity to honor all this range of emotions that we have been talking about. And I hope, as Tal said, that we remind ourselves that these are benefits worth keeping, not just for a pandemic year, but moving forward. Students learn better when they feel psychologically safe, when they feel whole, when they don't feel threatened, ostracized, marginalized, excluded, made fun of. We are all more creative when we feel that I am in a safe, welcoming, and inclusive space. That's the ABC of learning. You don't have that. You have students protecting their ego so much that all their mental energy goes to self-protection as opposed to creation and innovation.
Thank you, Isaac. Wonderful. Tal, this, I can see what Isaac is saying that goes directly into the workplace. To me, it seems the same thing. We can be more productive in the workplace if we are also feeling psychologically safe. What trends have you seen in the workplace right now, and what rituals can we implement in the workplace? And one other thing that was interesting coming up in the chat, what is the relationship between permission to be human and then ruminating? How do we know that when we're getting into too much permission, how do we fine tune that, and how are we aware of that we lay the space for it, and then we can gently move those emotions along and try to engage in more positive thoughts or reframing?
Yeah, so let me actually begin with the second part of the question, which is distinguishing rumination from healthy permission. So I draw on the work of Sonia Lubomyrsky, who shows that when we experience painful emotions, it's actually unhelpful to ruminate, to go over it again and again in our minds. What is healthy is to either write about it or talk about it. So keeping a journal, going back to the work of Jamie Pennybaker, can be extremely helpful. Obviously, the talking cure, just sharing it with someone we can trust, that can go a long way in helping us alleviate it. Just keeping it here, just ruminating over it, that in and of itself is unhelpful. I would add just a third method of expressing emotion, giving ourselves the permission to be human beyond talking about it and writing about it, and that is crying, shedding tears. The research shows that when we shed tears, we release oxytocin, that's the love hormone. We release opiates, the calming chemicals. So there's a great deal of benefit to just having a good cry once in a while, certainly during these times. So that's about the difference between rumination and permission. What about this in the workplace? I go back to the work of Robert Greenleaf, one of the great organizational psychologists. Back in the 1970s, he asked a very important question, and that is, what constitutes extraordinary leadership? Now, extraordinary leadership is always important. It's especially important in extraordinary times, such as today, which is why I think his work is so relevant today. And when he looked at the extraordinary leaders throughout history, whether in religion, politics, business, community, he found the most important characteristic was that they perceived themselves and acted as servants, servant leadership. You know, he went all the way back to the Bible, and he talked about how Moses, you know, God chose Moses when Moses ran after one of the livestock and brought it back to the flock. He said, well, he's serving the animals, he will also serve my people. Fast forward to the Christian Bible, Jesus came to serve the people. Fast forward to the 20th century, you know, Mahatma Gandhi served his people. Nelson Mandela came out of prison, 27 years in Robbins Island. All the cameras are on him. What does he say? He had a bit of time to think about what he was going to say at that point. Here is what he said. He said, I am your servant. You look at it also in the business world. The best business leaders are servants. Anita Roddick, you know, in her book, Business as Unusual, what does she talk about? Serving the employees, serving the customers, serving the environment. It's all about service. Leaders as servants. Now, what is the number one characteristic of the leader as servant? Number one characteristic, listening. Their ability to listen. This is what people need today. This is what our children need. This is what our employees need. This is what our partners need. This is what we need. You know, going back to the Bible, when God chose, and again, whether you see it as a true story or as a metaphor, it doesn't matter. There's an important message here. When God chose Moses, what was Moses' response? He said, I can't lead the people. You know, I have a speech impediment. I stutter. And yet God chose him. There is a message there. And the message here is that listening is more important than speaking for extraordinary leadership. And that's what our organizations need. And that's what our homes need. You know, many parents ask, so what can we do for our children? Listen first. What do we need today? We need to be listened to first. And that also has to do, of course, with Isaac's point of procedural justice. When you're listened to, when you're heard, you feel fairness and you feel like what you say matters.
So there's a big difference between listening and hearing. You know, it's interesting that I'd like to hear your take on this, Tal, that sometimes in awareness, because many times another person is speaking and we're having an internal dialogue as to, well, what I'm going to say. What are you really saying to me? What am I going to say back to you? And this what you're saying and that one. So you're having this whole conversation that it's probably not even relevant to what's being said in the moment. So I'd like to hear your take on that. And the other part about servant leadership, does it tie into, why is it so difficult? Why is our culture not ready to embrace it? Is it vulnerability? It's almost fear. It's, you know, that compassionate leaders are weak. Why do we have that mindset?
Yeah, you know, I must say, I don't know where it comes from, that mindset, but it certainly exists. You know, what do most students learn in business school? You know, you as the manager, you have to come up with the answers. And, you know, that was more true perhaps 100 years ago, 50 years ago. Today, what we need as managers is to be able to listen and to be able to come up with the questions. And that is what great leaders do. Unfortunately, still, we are rewarded for answers. We're rewarded for you know, arousing speeches rather than our ability to be present to whomever is around us. Fortunately, more and more research is coming out today, whether it's through, you know, Ken Blanchard on servant leadership, whether it's Jim Collins, who talks about leadership at the highest levels. What they are showing is that rather than charisma, rather than answers, what we need is being present and listen, and what we need to is ask questions. So hopefully organizations will catch up with the research, and I suspect that what we're going through right now will expedite this process to recognize what is truly important in the realm of leadership.
Thank you. I think that it's also important to recognize that we need training. You know, we need training in the workplace, and and in schools and universities, because this is, for some reason, it's both intuitive. We know it. I mean, this, what we're discussing here today, nobody's saying, well, I never thought that makes sense. It all makes sense. Yet we do the complete opposite. And we raise our children and give them messages that don't tie into to promoting really their optimal well-being. And we love them and we're so vested in them, but we're not doing the things that we're recognizing that in the last 20 to 25 years of research shows this is the way that we need to start communicating. These are the kinds of leaders that we need to, or the skills that we need to embed in leaders and foster in leaders, and the leaders that should be leaders, you know, in the first place. And so I think training, awareness, teaching and training is so important. But what is exciting is that all of you have different programs, methodologies, books, my God, blogs, chats, talks, where you can access this learning and train, and not train the trainer and bring the ripples about, and right, you know, it's here, it's there. And somebody just posted in government, absolutely, we need to demand it in government. We need to measure it, right? We need a language, then we need to be able to measure it, and then we need to correct. And it's not who did what and hasn't done this. It's like, let's just do it. With this opportunity now with COVID, let's just do it. We have the knowledge, and we can definitely start doing that. Maria, I'd like to ask you something that came up on the chat that I think you'd be, you know, such a great resource to answer this. What's the difference between self-compassion and self-indulgence? Because when we hear self-care, everybody thinks a spa and such, and that's nice. And I think that could be part of self-care, but some people might think that's indulgent. And I hear this also in leaders, right? This paradigm of like, well, you know, I'm not going to take vacation. I'm not going to do downtime. I'm just going to, you know, push through because that's indulgent. Or it's remarkable, these super smart, high achieving individuals putting off vacations or putting off downtime, and it's eating away at them, because guess what, they're humans, so it's going to happen whether you want it or not. You're going to have biological and mental reactions. So how can we start educating people around self-care, or self-compassion versus self-indulgence?
I think there's a great confusion in the West, certainly, about self-care and selfishness, that we confuse the two as if we don't matter. And so when we take actions that are self-kind, like self-compassion, or self-respecting, like building in time for vacation and so on, or even just choosing not to answer every single email, you know, if it keeps you up till 3 a.m, you know, that we think we're somehow being selfish, as if the energy of the world is a pie. And if we take too much of the piece of the pie, we're not being fair there, you know. And the reality is there is and this is where Isaac started us off with, right? There's the mattering of the me and the mattering of the we, and they're both important. And self-indulgence is when we forget the we forget the other, right? And selflessness is when we forget ourselves, and neither of those are healthy positions or places of well-being, right? Karen, with your permission, I would love to go back to a question earlier in the chat and ask
Absolutely
Isaac and Tal about something that's sort of a little fascinating to me right now. So I know we all are in agreement about these small daily practices to cultivate well-being and health. There was a question in the chat about hope. How do you cultivate hope on a daily basis? And I would tell you my initial response is much in alignment with what we've been talking about, which is, you know, in any one morning, wake up and say, what is one small step I can take that will activate hope within me? So the understanding we need to have about hope is that it is a felt sense. It is an emotion. It is having, you know, a cognitive response. I feel optimistic is attached to hope, but hope is actually made manifest through action. We feel hopeful when we take positive steps forward. So the frame we have been working from is all about these small steps so far. I would like to throw out a question to Isaac and Tal about, you know, taking that novel risk, about the brave step forward. And this came to me in a conversation with a colleague last month, when we honestly said it, you know, there's one lens through which if we had to give ourselves a grade for COVID, our COVID response, we'd say it was pretty mediocre. Like, I didn't adopt any children. I didn't rescue a koala. I didn't save a polar bear. I did not feed thousands of, like, really, like, I just kind of got through, right? On one level. On another level, there were moments where I took brave, courageous action, like out of the box for me, and it changed everything for a long period of time. And just one tiny example, I found myself in a breakout room in a Zoom course I was taking as a student, and I was the minority, which doesn't often happen. You know, 5 people, women of color, and myself. And I decided to say a thing that's been in my heart for years and never had the courage to say, which is I honored and respected that I come from 2 lineages, Sicilian and French Canadian. And while I have no idea where my ancestors ever were in terms of the conversation about race, I do believe they probably may not have caused extreme harm, but they probably did nothing to make it better. And I wanted to apologize for the lineages that I come from, those I'm connected to, how they did not contribute to a higher level conversation and justice in the world. And it was probably the most vulnerable thing I have done in 2020. But that capacity to be in the conversation that way and be brave and out of the box, it changed the next 2 months for me. And you can still feel the energy in me now. Mm-hmm. It was meaningful. It was my signature strength of courage. And it was listening to the pain in the room and not being afraid of that. So Isaac and Tal, could you just, let's talk about courage and novel steps, and where might that take us, this audience?
Well, Tal and I agreed that all the difficult questions will be answered by Tal first. So
agreed. Go, Tal.
That was a very courageous thing to do, Isaac. So, you know, when it comes to hope, I want to first talk about what it is in general, and then I want to go to the personal. You know, when it comes to hope, I think of the research by Rick Snyder. Rick Snyder talks about hope as comprising 2 elements. The first element is a willpower, and that is the notion that, you know, yes, I can do it. And the second part of hope is way power, and this is how I'm going to do it. And if that doesn't work, this is how I'm going to do it. You know, so willpower is, you know, yes, I can, or yes, we can, which is important for us as individuals, as a society. We can overcome this. Way power, how are we going to do it? And what if this first path doesn't work? And if that second doesn't work either, and third, and on and on. So this is on you know, so you waking up in the morning, Maria, and writing down, these are all the ways in which I'm going to get through the day. You know, that's way power. Mm-hmm. And that's a very important part of hope. Now, hope is very important because, you know, the difference between sadness and depression is that depression is sadness without hope. Depression is sadness without hope. So hope is what takes us out of the hole, or prevents us from staying in dire straits. So you know, again, that's the academic, and it's very much applied. When it comes, and now I want to get a little bit more personal here. When it comes to cultivating hope during these days, what I find is the most important for me is to take action, to do things. You know, so people ask me, so what are you doing differently these days than you did a year ago? You know, based on, you know, what you know from the science of happiness. And my answer is, I do the same things, only more of them. I go back to basics even more. You know, for many people, it's courageous just, you know, getting out of bed and going for a walk, or, you know, doing what Isaac suggested. Just do those 3 minutes, not more than that, small action, but just do it. You know, that takes a lot of courage. That takes a lot of strength to do it. And what that action does is it helps us also, not only, but also feel better. So my focus these days is on small activities small actions, whether it's opening up, as you did, Maria, in a call, whether it's, getting up and going for a walk, whether it's, sitting down and really focusing on listening, even though I'm so distracted, I just want to get out of that situation. So doing all these things, to my mind, they're courageous acts. And the important thing is not just to do them, but also to, pat ourselves on the back for doing them. It's not trivial. It's not easy. And, one of my favorite sound bites revolves around appreciation, and the meaning of the word appreciate that has a double meaning, to say thank you for something and to grow in value. Well, when we appreciate the good in our lives, the good appreciates. We have more of it. So when we appreciate small acts of courage, we gain more courage as a result. When we display small acts of hope, of hopefulness, we become more hopeful. And by extension, because hope, like any psychological trait, is contagious, we also spread it. Isaac, I know you have been waiting patiently. It's your turn now.
Thank you. I have been actually enjoying listening to the two of you, but I couldn't agree more with the emphasis on action and the small steps and the minimally noticeable difference, because that grows self-efficacy. In my mind, Maria, what is going to make us jump from hope to courage is reconnecting with our values, our passion, and our purpose. And in my class, I ask students to spend time to thinking about their legacy, about their passion, about their focus, right? So refocusing on what I believe, what am I passionate about, what is going to be my legacy in the world. I believe that concentration is going to move us from hope to take a big jump of courage. Some people have left the city. They have gone to the country during the pandemic. They decided, I'm done with the urban environment, with the noise, with the pollution, with traffic. Some people have left. This is a big decision. Some people are not going back to work. Of course, these are people with privilege who can afford it, but there are many examples of people who have reconnected with their signature strengths and have asked themselves, what is going to be my legacy about? And I believe that reconnection to your core being, maybe the basics that Tal is talking about, that is what I believe fuels the courage and the bravery to do something we haven't done before, which is outside of the ordinary. So it's a matter of also scheduling time to reconnect with your focus. And when I do coaching and I teach classes, sometimes I am afraid that I come across as superbly boring to my students because I am very scheduled, I love routines. I love to exercise and I love my breakfast in a certain way. And I love to spend time with my wife. But if you don't schedule it and you're not disciplined about it, just life vanishes and you are not intentional. So I think we have to help ourselves being intentional by being disciplined and building these small moments. So a small moment of reconnecting with values, passion, and purpose can become a big jump, a big moment of making big decisions, I think.
I just want to tie into what you all just said right now, in particular, what you mentioned, Isaac. So on a personal note, I experience what you all are describing after personal tragedy. And it was in the moment of purpose and meaning, that I found the courage to act. So I think it's important to understand that you can act before you feel. So you don't wait to feel happy to start doing these happiness practices, right? That you can really tying into your values, surfacing your values. What are your values? And that's what I was talking before, that it's important to have the self-awareness and the training. And for me, it was to really look at what I wanted my legacy to be, and what the meaning and purpose of my life, and the meaning of the context of what happened in my family, and also what I wanted the legacy to be for my children. And so I acted before I felt, and actually I was quite broken before for a long time. But the bridge to happiness for me was purpose and meaning. And by acting, I started feeling, and I started, like copy, what do happy people do, or what, all these things that have been said here today. We are all kind of experts of our own happiness. So maybe for you, it's going to be quite intuitive and feel great to do the morning ritual of the journaling. For others, it might not. And it might be the dancing, and it might be calling a friend, or whatever it is that you're doing. Just try something. Something is going to make you feel better. I mean, I can guarantee you that. And the other thing is, you will know what that is. And then just, continue it, because it will make an impact. The small steps will eventually have a greater impact in your life and in the life of others. But you got to trust that it will happen. I want to make sure that we tackle this question before we go here, which I think is elemental, and we're asked this all the time. And please jump in, whoever wants to answer it first. The difference between happiness and joy, right? What do we mean by happiness? What do we mean by well-being? And then the emotion of joy. Can we make a distinction around that? Let's take turns in answering that.
I think Tal's up first.
Oh my goodness, Tal.
I was waiting for that. Yeah, so, so much of it is, of course, about the definitions. How do we define it? And people define joy differently, and they define happiness differently, and well-being. Let me give you my 2 bits, and again, by no means the right, and certainly not only definitions. So joy would be more of the emotion. Happiness, to me, would be more inclusive. So yeah, joy is absolutely a part of a happy life, but a happy life is also about cultivating healthy relationships. It's about mattering. It's about meaning and a sense of purpose. It's certainly related to learning and growing. That's part of who we are as human beings. For me, the best definition that I encountered is from Helen Keller, who talks about whole happiness as wholeness. In other words, looking at the full, at our full nature. That is also about our emotions, and that's learning to deal with painful emotions. It's about cultivating joy, and also about finding a sense of meaning and purpose, and about learning, and about cultivating relationships, and about, of course, our physical well-being, and so on. So happiness to me is more a holistic, holistic construct, multifaceted. There are different elements. Joy is one of those elements. Now, one more thing about the multifaceted nature of happiness. Happiness is a system. It's one whole. When it comes to a system, there are many ways in. Karen, you talked earlier about impacting our happiness through different measures, through different means, by trying things, by experimenting. Mahatma Gandhi called his autobiography My Experiments with Truth. Mm-hmm. He didn't call it My Finding Truth. He didn't call it My Ultimate Truth. He called it My Experiments with Truth. And this is the approach that we need to take, as you pointed out. We need to experiment, try things out, see what works. As much as the 4 of us emphasize research so much in our lectures, in our presentations, in our programs. Even more so, what we emphasize beyond research is me search. And that is experimenting, trying, and seeing what works, and then learning from that.
Well said. Thank you, Tal. Maria.
You know, I don't know that I have much to add, except that I have an intuitive sense that I can be happy with myself and my day, having had a hard day, because it's a day filled with meaning and progress and effort. It's not about delight, right? But joy seems to me to be connected to permission to experience what I love and who I love. You know, that my moments of joy are deeply connected to what infuses me with passion and what excites me, and they are more fleeting than the states of happiness or the wholeness of happiness. I find that I can't quite construct joy. Like, I can't quite wake up in the morning and say I'm going to have a joyful moment this afternoon, but I can, by attending to what actually excites and lifts and impassions me, experience joy organically. So that's just sort of an intuitive understanding. Isaac, where are you at on this question?
So I take a page from Paul Dolan, who is a British psychologist and economist. And Paul says that happiness is about balancing pleasure and purpose. And for me, joy falls more under the pleasure side, which is incredibly important. And Paul says we have to balance pleasure with purpose. I think this is in line with everything we have said today. And for me, happiness is also encompasses pleasure, purpose, and different domains, as Tal was saying. And they're all interacting. And I couldn't agree more that when we're stuck, we have to experiment with what am I going to cultivate today? Interpersonal, occupational, physical, psychological well-being. And I think we shouldn't be afraid to try out and experiment things. And I really believe that we cannot, as Dolan says, just be purpose machines or pleasure machines. You know, we have to balance the two. It's very difficult to have a purposeful life when you cannot find a moment of joy and relish and delight and savor the moment. So I'm all about balancing pleasure and purpose.
To me, I want to add that to me also, the purpose bit ties into sustainability, the sustainability of the happiness or the well-being, right? Because absolutely, you cannot be happy or having positive emotion, joyful all the time. It's, you know, again, Tal, you've talked about that the only people that don't feel negative emotion are psychopaths or dead people. So you are going to feel quote unquote negative or challenging emotions. But I think that through purpose, through meaning, through altruism, through acts of kindness, through the we culture, through investing in these things that are more kind of like the cognitive parts of happiness, as it were, it makes the opportunities for the positive emotions to happen more frequently, you know. And again, as societies, we have a difficult time thinking in terms of sustainability. I mean, look at the environment, right? We don't think about sustainability. We think about quick gains, right? We, you know, and short-term impacts. And so I think that the science of happiness, well-being in the way that we're discussing in here, which has to do with resilience, mattering, feeling valued, doing things for other people, those are, that's like scaffolding to when life happens, and also to the sustainability of feeling well, of trending. You know, you have the ups and downs, but in your line of life, you're trending up. You're going to have downs because that's normal. But I think that in this framework, that's where the sustainability kicks in. What do you think about that, the sustainability aspect, Tal?
Isaac,
Isaac, I saw that you were going to say something.
Yes,
Isaac.
yes. So actually, in our writings, I modified Dolan's definition. He says you have to balance pleasure and purpose, and I add over time.
Mm-hmm.
Over time in different domains of life.
Mm-hmm.
So you can think about the interpersonal, physical, emotional, psychological, etc. And the way to make it sustainable is to make it actionable and to make it easy and repeatable, which is why sometimes I think I'm a very boring person, because I schedule, my life is very scheduled. But to answer my own critique, I would say that my life is very rich because my life is full of good habits. And so what can we do to spread good habits? And please notice, good habits are not against creativity. On the contrary, I think, sometimes students say, I'm having writer's block. And I tell them, I don't believe in writer's block, right? So they get very upset at me. What do you mean you don't believe in writer's block? And I say, because if you schedule time to work on your outline and look at your outline and do some reading, there is always something that will emerge out of the action, as opposed to waiting from this divine inspiration. I'm not a divine inspiration writer. I think there are very few who are. So I tell my students, unless you're one of those 1 in a million, I recommend that you have an outline, have a plan, take action, and that's how good writing happens, right? That's how creativity happens. You have to schedule time to be creative. You have to block out the extraneous interference so that you can dedicate time to be creative. So that's how you sustain it. You schedule it, you create a habit, and you nurture it.
Just to reinforce what Isaac said, there's a lot of research out there on procrastination, on delaying things, till tomorrow and beyond. And what they found was that the main difference between procrastinators and non-procrastinators is actually the mental schema that they have, the psychological model that they've internalized. Specifically, procrastinators, people who push things off, believe that inspiration needs to precede action. Inspiration needs to precede action. In other words, I first have to really want to do it and really be inspired to do it, and then I'll, write my dissertation or write a book or clean out the garage. Whereas people who don't procrastinate have the opposite mental schema. They understand that usually action precedes inspiration. When I wake up in the morning, it's rare that I'm just, I can't get right out of bed and just, get in front of my computer and write. Sometimes it does happen. But usually what happens is I get out of bed because it's a habit and it's a ritual. Just like I brush my teeth every day and I sit in front of my computer and I start writing a chapter. And then before I know it, usually I'm into it. It's the action that precedes the inspiration. And that sustains not just action, as Isaac pointed out, it also sustains psychological health. Once again, action precedes motivation or inspiration.
Thank you, Tal. Maria, give us the last bits of wisdom here to send us off. There's a lot of questions about when are we going to gather again in person for WOHASU. Hopefully 2022 we'll get this all together so we can all be in each other's company and have that joyous experience. There's also a lot of questions about education. We can send those out. Maria, can you close us off?
Yeah, I would love to illustrate what both Isaac and Tal have said with this personal anecdote. So I began writing one true thing, took 2 minutes, 1 minute every single morning since January 1st, one true thing. And from that action that was just mattering to myself emerged some courageous actions out in the world, like using my voice on behalf of justice in new ways and so on. It sustained the energy to keep my health and well-being. So I'm in a much better place than I was December 31st. And I want to leave you with a poem quote from a poem by Rumi, it's called These Spiritual Window Shoppers, who wrote centuries ago, these spiritual window shoppers who idly ask, how much is that? I'm just looking. They handle 100 items and put them down. Shadows with no capital. They walk into the shop and their whole lives pass suddenly in that moment. Where did you go? Nowhere. What did you do? Nothing much. And then his challenge. Even if you don't know what you want, buy something, try something, build in a practice, schedule your day, take an experiment with some element of happiness, buy something, be part of the exchanging flow, start a huge, foolish project like Noah. It makes absolutely no difference what others are thinking of you. I like to think of my life as a huge, foolish building of an ark for myself and those I care for. It's messy, it's smelly, things break, it doesn't always work. And I'm fully engaged with my life. So that's the invitation from the place of resilience and happiness and well-being and mattering. Think of your life as a huge, beautiful, foolish, unique, particular, significant arc.
So beautiful, Maria. Thank you so much. Thank you, Tal. Thank you, Isaac. Thank you, everyone who joined us today. What a gift to have all of you. I'll just say in my life, I am so grateful to you. You have enhanced my life in ways that I cannot begin to share with you or to be able to speak to you about. It transcends. And in the community here today, it's beautiful how you are the ripples that will make this world a better place and are making the world a better place. You are what's possible. You are educators, you're mothers, you're fathers, you're business leaders, you're entrepreneurs, you're kids. And this world will be better, is getting better because you are here, because you showed up. And Maria, Isaac, and Tal, the dedication of your life to this mission, I mean, the transformation that you have already brought to the world and are bringing now because of your sacrifice at times and your contribution, we cannot thank you so much. So from the entire world, we say thank you.